The almost physically repulsive, yet awe-inducing manifestation of Rimbaud's quote, that the only unbearable thing is that nothing is unbearable. Better than food, man. Well, y'all don't come here for bunny rabbits and sunshine, do ya? Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a nice Thanksgiving. Get that coffee. This was a recommendation from my friend and patron Charles. Thanks, man. I was very, very impressed. Today I'm reviewing Lord of Dark Places by Hal Bennett. If you're easily offended, please read this. You'll get the most out of it. But first, today's review is sponsored by the Ridge Wallet. My friend, are you tired of carrying around the warped skin of a dead animal on your ass? Maybe you're not, but if you are, these things are fantastic. They are light, sleek, industrial, beautiful little pieces of minimalist, modernist design. Holds up to 12 cards plus room for cash on the back. Cash clip right there. They make excellent gifts for the holidays, just saying. Very functional, not too expensive, not too cheap, stylish. Checks a lot of boxes. The durable material means that each wallet comes with a lifetime warranty. You could buy this one wallet and carry it for life. This is the aluminum navy model. However, if you prefer something else, of course, there's over 30 colors and styles to choose from, including carbon fiber and burnt titanium. And if this didn't convince you, please check out their 40,000 five-star reviews. Yes, 40,000. For a limited time, that is until December 7th, get 15% off your order with free worldwide shipping and returns by going to ridge.com/betterthanfood and using the discount code betterthanfood. After the 7th, it goes back to 10%. The link is below. Check it out. Thanks a bunch. Lord of Dark Places is extremely refreshing in this modern era because of one major reason. It does not care what you think of it. Doesn't care. In a world where making a mistake regarding what you say or write can cost you not only your job, but possibly your life, where there is so much anxiety over what people think of you, reading something like this is like a pitcher of ice-cold water in the desert. That is glorious and immensely refreshing. How can we expect to grow in an environment of total surveillance, where no mistakes are allowed, when, in a way, growth is exactly what's being attacked? Because how do you grow? Any one of us knows. How do you grow? You grow by learning from your... Right. And there you have it. Now, imagine along comes a guy in an era of similar censorship, similar emphasis on keeping up appearances, civil rights era, Vietnam War era, riots era. But instead of bending over, he decides to say, fuck it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to who may be the greatest unsung American novelist of the 20th century, Hal Bennett. Lord of Dark Places is a novel by the American author Hal Bennett, and it was published in 1970. Bennett is the author of satirical novels and short stories, and there's very little on him, that I could find online at least. There's one exceptional piece on him online from this guy named Ronald Walcott in this publication called Black World from the 70s. I think it's 74, and I've linked to it below. Excellent coverage of his novels, but then there's nothing on Ronald Walcott that I could find. It's very difficult to track down information. Bennett's Wikipedia has nothing. This book is like James Baldwin and Harry Crews sat down together over double scotches and rewrote Midnight Cowboy, spanning the Deep South, from Virginia all the way down to New Orleans, and then downtrodden Newark, New Jersey in the 60s, around the time of the riots, around the time of in the Vietnam War and the assassination of Martin Luther King. And all of it as an homage to Jean Genet, all the while, as a soundtrack, listening to the most stripped down performance of Children of God by Swans, and Ex-Military by Death Grips, and smoking joint after joint of some downright evil hash. That's Lord of Dark Places. Just about. You're somewhere in the ballpark. It's an absolutely no-holds-barred, brutal black Bildungsroman of Odyssean proportion, proof of mankind's durability, and explicit justification for his expulsion from the Garden of Eden. At the same time, the almost physically repulsive yet awe-inducing manifestation of Rimbaud's quote, that the only unbearable thing is that nothing is unbearable. The book has more punch than Mike Tyson's finishing uppercut on Marvis Frazier. This, to me, seems like American fiction at its most ambitious, at its most daring. Bennett, like the French author Georges Bataille, I know, explicitly links sex and death with eroticism, and tells a fantastical kind of coming-of-age adventure story wherein these two elements are joined, in an American setting, by a third, which is that of race and racism, specifically here in America, specifically in the middle of the 20th century, specifically between, not always, but most prominently between blacks and whites. Cormac McCarthy may be the better writer. Hal Bennett is the braver author. Frankly, it's criminal that Hal Bennett is not more well known. I don't know why, but I could guess. Perhaps it was suppressed because people didn't want to touch this thing, whether out of prejudice or fear, who knows. But it survived, and it got into my hands, and now the secret's going to be out. This is the first of his that I've read. I haven't read any of his other novels. He wrote under pseudonyms. Interestingly, I think he wrote under the name of a woman as well, which is curious. Especially after reading this. Coarse, carnal, pornographic, evil-minded, vulgar, erotic, repulsive, genuinely funny, irreverent, heartfelt, cathartic, brutal, challenging, tragic, disgusting, fairly mind-blowing, and downright horrifying. Lord of Dark Places by Hal Bennett was published in 1970. I have a copy of what I believe is either the original, I think it's actually the second run. I ordered it for like $6 or $7, and there are not many of these, so if you enjoy this book, you might want to go and check it out. It arrived smelling like pure, stale cigar smoke, which is so appropriate I can't even describe. I classify this as a transgressive novel. This is probably one of not only the greatest transgressive novels ever written, it's one of the greatest American novels of the 20th century that I've read. But it's one that's going to blanket offend everybody. Some way, somehow. Doesn't matter. Moving on. It's one of the hardest, most brutal things I've ever read. By that, I mean intense. Top 5 most intense, somewhere in there for sure. Right up there with, oh God, anything. Guyta, Sadegh. The major difference is that those are almost literary experiments in depravity, right? Like structurally and otherwise. Whereas Bennett actually tells a story. I mean, Sadegh's not gonna make you cry. Bennett will, absolutely, which makes him way more intense. While it's raw, it will also move you to tears, for sure. In a way that the only word I can come up with to describe is sincere. There's a lot of sincerity and abrasive truth in this novel. There's no defense of experimentation between you and him, between, you know, the book and the reader. There's no pretense of experimentation or post anything. It's a straight story. It's very simple to understand. In that respect, it's simple. Of course, it's not. You can rationalize away Sadegh and Guyta, and Genet too. I mean, but Bennett is so sincere, he'll get right into your emotional guts and set off a bomb. And while being hard, you know, it's also hard to read, even for me as a pretty jaded reader. But the violence and sexual abuse in this one even made me just go, whew. Even as satire, it's pushed all the way to the extreme. And I'm just like, am I really gonna talk about this in public? Yes. Yes, I am. Because at the end of the day, after I finished it, it was quite clear it's a great book and it should be read. That being said, caveat, admittedly, I had to stop in the middle of the book. At the kind of point of no return incident in the middle of the book, you know what I'm talking about if you've read it. Kind of in a state of shock, disgust, kind of walked around the apartment for a while thinking about that, like how the hell am I gonna talk about this in public? And just generally kind of trying to wrap my head around, you know, the world and mankind's propensity for evil and cruelty. But I recovered, and here we are. I mean, I recommend this book in the way that one would recommend Pasolini's Salo. That is, I recommend it. It's a great film. It's a great piece of art. But I'm telling you right now, you're not gonna have a pleasant experience because that's not what this is about. But if you can handle it, inside you may find truth. Not the truth, a truth. Something about what mankind at heart is and what it seeks to be but is not yet. There are 2 epigraphs in the beginning, you know, quotes. I have not spoken in secret in a dark place of the earth. I declare things that are right. That's from Isaiah in the Bible, 45:19. The second is attributed to the Journal of Reverend Cobb, who is a character who is actually given the death penalty in the book, and the main character, Joe, sees it. It goes like this. Before a man can be saved, he must be born again. Lord, how can a man be born again? He must die, motherfucker. He must die. That's a hell of a way to start a book. That's the best opening epigraph quote thing I've come across, I think. So Joe Market, our protagonist, is born into a poor family in Virginia with a history of tragedy. His grandfather was lynched by a white mob in a scene reminiscent of Going to Meet the Man by James Baldwin. Arguably even more disturbing. Didn't think that was possible. It is, apparently. Titus, his eccentric father, is himself a product of incest. The whole thing has kind of a mythological quality to it. His father accidentally kills his mother one day by having sex with her, and she has like something with her heart or something, gives out in the middle of coitus. And so he takes Joe on the road and has this bright idea to start a new religion with him, featuring his naked son paraded around. Basically, it's kind of a front for hustling him all over the country. Kind of like a demented backwoods branch of New Christianity. Something bizarre and sinister. Reminds me of like the snake preachers of West Virginia. He's sexually abused by his father. He's being pimped out by him throughout all the South for years. So sexual abuse is normalized to a degree that is kind of unfathomable for this kid from a young age. That's awful enough. To add to that, because of this new religion, where, you know, these crowds come and see him, you know, showing off his body naked, he develops this really bizarre, narcissistic Christ complex, right? So he starts to really love showing himself off. And he gets older and older, and, you know, he starts to get this ego, this narcissistic idea that he, in fact, is a young god. You see what I say about the mythological quality of it? Yeah. I mean, it sounds awful, but it is, but it's fascinating, you know, kind of the structure of the whole thing, wherein he really does start to believe he is a god, and he uses his sexuality as such, as a means of domination. Even though his father just knows it's all a ruse, right? He's just exploiting his son and pimping him out to the crowds, basically, men and women. It starts to not matter to Joe. So from a very young age, Joe is hustling, essentially. And he and his father are doing this whole thing on the road for years. It's such an accelerated onslaught of intensity, wherein there's no time to reflect and question the psychologically pathological actions of his father, who's basically been raping him and pimping him out since he was young. Wherein there's so much in the avalanche of experience this kid has, he adapts and assimilates it and becomes what he's told he is, which is a god. When Titus, his father, realizes this, he tries to teach him a lesson, but it backfires and destroys not only their operation, but probably also kills Titus. We don't know. But Joe escapes into the new, you know, this new world outside of this whole bizarre thing his father's constructed. Literally naked into the wilderness. You see what the mythological thing, again, pretty heavy here. And quickly is humbled in the most brutal of ways. First, he has to find some clothes, and then he hops a train and goes up north. But he realizes very quickly, in fact, that he is not a god, and nobody cares about him. I'll read you the part where his father starts raging against white people and making the black crowd nervous. This is when his father has decided that he's going to get the police to come and break up the whole thing and arrest Joe, teach him a lesson. Titus's logic and reasoning is not so good because, you know, it completely backfires, but it's meant to actually teach Joe a lesson and by having him arrested, but what it turns into is this kind of spontaneous sermon on oppression and the failure of white Christianity for African Americans, which is actually a consistent theme in the book. For once, in his sermon, he actually starts speaking how he feels. He stops his normal routine and he starts riffing, and he starts actually saying what he feels. Because him and Joe have been terrorized by whites in the South many times. High on the scaffold above him, Joe's whole body went tense. What the fuck had gotten into Titus? He'd never heard his father talk like this before, and he listened with both ears. Well, we old folks, we might be willing to wait, Titus went on, because we don't have much time left to wait in. But the winds of change are sweeping everything now, and there's a new generation of black young people that is not willing to wait. They want action now. They want change now. They are tired of talking and complaining and dying. They want to live now and hold their heads up now and be treated like men and women now. There's a new generation, I tell you, and they are asking questions and demanding answers. Why can't I be equal to you, Mr. White Man? Why do I have to wait? Why should I lick your boots? But although our young people can question and demand, they will not be heard. We old people know that. They will not be heard. They will be dragged from their beds and lynched in the middle of the night. They will be accosted on lonely roads and killed in the most despicable manner, but they will not be heard. Inside the climate of America, then, is there any salvation for the black man? Certainly there is none for him inside the Christian church, and there is none for him in the Bible. So, if no provision has been made for us to save our souls, we are perfectly free to seek salvation any way we can. My way always has been to be as contrary to everything as I can be. When the Bible says black, I say white. When it says good, I say evil. When it says, behold, Jehovah is a God of light, I say, behold, he is the Lord of dark places. For his children gnash their teeth and cry unto him and are not heard. It's powerful stuff. They are not heard. Kind of like Bennett was not heard. So he goes up north, gets married, has a baby, goes to Vietnam, and in Vietnam he has a life-changing moment with a dying man in a hospital. That actually brought me to tears. That's the moment that made me cry. Then comes back to America and commits what is arguably the worst crime you could possibly commit. Just about the worst. And yet we're still reading. That's when I put down the book, by the way, for a little bit. And yet we're still reading because we're like, how the hell is he going to live with this? You gotta read it. It's like, this is like the first half of the book. Hal Bennett is an American author from Virginia. He was nominated as the most promising writer of the year in 1970 in Playboy for a short story he submitted. He won the Faulkner Prize in 1973 and went to college in Mexico City. Very interesting guy. There are a few other novels I'm aware of from him, but I'm not sure they're anything like this. I'd like to know Bennett's full story. He wrote an autobiography, it says on Wikipedia, called The Visible Man, which of course is a play on the title of Ralph Ellison's classic novel, which I regretfully have not yet read, The Invisible Man. I will definitely get to that. Some things in this book are a stretch, of course, but for like sheer audacity, mixed with a sophisticated, measured writing style, an individual, unique tone, encapsulating a truly ferocious, vicious, complex, and lucid point of view in a certain time in a certain place, it's a force to be reckoned with. And that's putting it mildly. Now, how in God's name could I say all of this good stuff about a basically pornographic, outrageously violent narrative that's misogynistic, racist, homophobic, all over the place, politically incorrect, and pretty much wrong? Because it's real. It's satire, but absolutely real and sincere and authentic. Though, of course, exaggerated and outrageous. As he says in the book, the truth is confusion. Ultimately, that's the conclusion that Joe arrives at. The truth is confusion. Now, when I say it's all of those negative things, you have to understand, it's not only those things. It's all the opposite as well. It's loving and sincere and vulnerable and deeply wishes to reconcile the gulf, the divide, between straight and gay, black and white, men and women, love and hate. The truth is confusion. That seems very accurate to me again. I know he's like the only author I orbit my thoughts around, but you know, Bataille, really, echoes of Bataille, who said, and I quote, "I believe that truth only has one face, that of a violent contradiction." If Bennett did not read him, then he arrived at similar conclusions on his own, which makes it even more fascinating. That's really quite unique. It's an actual portrait of a deeply conflicted man. He's a walking contradiction, partly truth, partly fiction. You will never find a book more raw, and you'd probably be hard-pressed to find one 10% as disturbing. Lord of Dark Places is the only specifically black transgressive fiction that I've come across. I know there's also Darius James's Negrophobia, which is published by NYRB. I have that on the shelf. I haven't read it yet. But that's kind of like more in like a, it's also satire, but it's like in a, it's like a screenplay. It's like a story told in a screenplay form, like a fake movie. As far as novels, this is the only one that I've ever come across. And well, just kind of like takes the cake. Forget African American or black transgressive fiction. It's as far as transgressive fiction, and even transcending that, just like American novels. This is huge, and this is not ever gonna be taught in schools like it needs to be. This is a great book. This is a completely bizarre, unique amalgamation of all different types of genres. I mean, it's like also like a comedy, and it's like a weird detective murder mystery at the same time. And it's like, you know, a early 1970s like romantic fatalism, 70s film sometimes. And it's just like, and then it's just goofy and simple and kind of like a buddy story at the same time. He meets this guy, this cop, this kind of like mildly crooked Italian cop named Tony Brenzo, and they go, you know, palling around and fucking shit up, smoking way too much pot and drinking. And, you know, so it really stands alone. But it starts as a Southern Gothic novel, and then it transforms into this other, and then it's a Vietnam War story. I mean, it's like, it's impressive. It's all over the place, but it's somehow, you know, you really get the whole thing. I mean, and then it's his journey to death. It also operates as very much as a critique on Christianity. As, for example, when Joe and some of his friends go to see this preacher who's convicted of murder, killed, electrocuted in the chair, like this public electrocution. It's very dark, and the scene is actually very similar. Again, Bataille, I know, it's crazy, but it's very similar to the bullfight scene in Story of the Eye. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. Same themes. They lead the preacher up to the chair, and they ask him if he has any last words, and so he does, and these are his last words. And so the book also operates as a critique of Christianity, which is compelling. Not an outright doing away with it's not an anti-Christian novel. It's just grappling with it, you know? And this is one of the moments of criticism. Mr. Cobb took a broad step and mounted the platform like he was going up into a pulpit to preach. Yes, I have prepared some last words, he said. His voice poured out in round ministerial tones. I found out a long time ago that the duty of the church is not to save sinners, but to make a man sin. It is a fear of the example of Christ that causes good men to turn bad. Follow the example of this man, the church says, and you'll wind up on the cross just like he did. The promise of heaven is pale indeed when a man has to die in order to achieve it. That is all I have to say. Very interesting. Hell of a book. Now, whatever I've said here today is absolutely paltry when compared to Ronald Walcott's exceptional essay on the novels of Hal Bennett, which I've linked to below. It's a really great read. It's really just it goes over everything in great detail and is a really nice analysis. It's from the 1974 edition of this publication called Black World. And it's so ridiculously good that I'm going to read a longish excerpt from it, if you don't mind. So this is the piece from Walcott here, and he says regarding the book, structurally, the novel is a series of baptisms and falls from innocence to experience reminiscent of the Invisible Man's recurring descents into the undercurrents of experience. For Ralph Ellison also employed that pattern in describing his nameless hero's expulsion from the southern campus Eden and journey north to Harlem, the city of dreams. In Lord of Dark Places, the city is Newark, and it is in reality a city of nightmares. Several subsidiary motifs of the myth of innocence also operate. The task performed to prove heroic potential in conquest of evil, the descent into an underworld of moral ambiguity in search of unrecoverable innocence, the search for a parent, usually the father, but here the mother, that involves the assertion of the male principle and the achievement of the self, and at every moment, the quest for salvation. Yeah, Walcott did it. It's a really great piece. I highly recommend you check it out. There's two different ones by him below. Walcott calls this book an exorcism, and those are the type of books that I like. You know, catharsis. Doesn't need to be the real truth, whatever that is. I myself, personally, just want to know what a character, that is, what an author, really feels. Really thinks and feels. I want to recognize myself in their confusion and strife and rage. Nobody knows the truth, right? Nobody knows anything really about how to live, the best way to live, blah, 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 why we're here. Who cares? So when somebody arrives at the devastating ambiguity of reality on their own, in their own authentic voice, that's powerful. That's really powerful. That shit hits really hard. Even if the character is abysmal, contemptible, and just plain evil and deserves the worst, which he does. He doesn't get quite the worst. He gets a little bit of comeuppance, but it's, you know, violence and sexual abuse are just the beginning for Joe Market. They're normalized, right? That's every day. As horrifying as it is for us, it just becomes so commonplace for him in his life that it's really just like one more thing to overcome. And he uses it as well. It's tough to read, but it's worth it. You might hate it. If so, good. Figure out why. That's my only request. You'll learn a lot about yourself and the world around you. I think that, you know, if you hate a book, if you have a real, like a visceral, I fucking hate this book, it's a really wonderful opportunity to examine yourself, the material, the world, life. A lot of great questions can come out of that. Sometimes, I mean, it actually opens up the possibility for the total 180 and actually falling in love with the material because I don't know, something about strong reactions. It's interesting. You know, at first you have a really viscerally negative reaction to something, and then you're like, oh wow, actually that's kind of amazing. This is why. If you're just neutral on it or bored, I feel like that's not exactly. It doesn't happen the same. It's not going to be not as much of a possibility, for me at least. So better than food, but I recommend it, you know, of course, with a heavy caveat, but better than food, without question. It was one of the best of the year. Yeah, just for it, because there's nothing else like it. There's nothing else like it. Never been written. This is the only one of its kind. Yeah, have at it. So what did I dislike? Well, you know, there were parts where it sort of meandered, slowed down a little too slow. Kind of got like a strange 70s comedy, just kind of like weird, which is what it is, I mean, basically in some moments. Some things were a bit of a stretch. You know, there's a lot of Christian allegory, and some of it works better than others. Cheap Murray, the whole murder of the white woman thing, that kind of like, yeah, maybe, but it's a little bit of some of it felt a little bit packed into the end, like kind of like, you know, I feel like he just some stuff needed to be elongated, some stuff needed to be contracted. Tempo gets a little wonky in places. I just thought it could have been more evenly distributed. Some parts felt a little rushed, others dragged on for far too long. Overall, what I'm trying to say is I think it could have used a better edit. The fact remains, it's a great novel and a totally original work. I have never read anything like it. I probably never will again. I'll be rereading it. In the ugliest, darkest of ways, it's a beautiful book. It's very moving and sincere. Coffee time. For those of you who are new, thank you for stopping by. I've taken the names of all the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video to the show. I place their names in this mason jar, and whoever's name I pull out, they are sent a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag, roasted by yours truly. And whoever wins shall be getting some coffee from Myanmar, which is delicious. If you would like to help support the show, I sincerely appreciate it. You can click on the link below, and you can get more information in the description box for all the tiers on Patreon as well. If you're a patron, you get all these reviews ad-free, plus access to the Patron-Only Reviews. There's more information below. Unfortunately, international shipping is not included. Thank you very much to all the patrons, and best of luck. Okay, here we go. Grant. Grant E. Thank you very much, Grant. You're going to receive Lord of Dark Places by Hal Bennett, plus some delicious coffee. I hope you love both. Cheers. Well, that is all I have for you today. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and always remember, bring a book wherever you go. Especially to Thanksgiving, because everybody's probably fighting. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Have a good night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.